Fotbollsvärld kryllar av agenter och rådgivare och sådana som vill hjälpa spelare både på gott och ont. Men en sak är det ont om och det är kvinnliga agenter. Faktum är att det är några procent av alla licensierade agenter hos FIFA som är kvinnor. Och en av dem finns faktiskt i Sverige. Katherine Saliusbury är amerikanska som slog sig på agentbranschen efter att ha lämnat jobbet som affärsadvokat och gifte sig med en svensk man och är nu baserad i Stockholm men jobbar naturligtvis mycket mot MLS, den amerikanska proffsligan, och har varit delaktig i flera av svenskarnas flyttar dit. Men hjälper även andra spelare. Jag var lite spänd på att sitta ner med henne för att höra det som skillnaderna mellan amerikansk proffsidrott, som ju närmast framstår som socialistisk i jämförelse med den vilda marknad som det är i Europa. Och sen också hur det är att vara kvinna i en så mansdominerad bransch. Och en hel del annat. Det är ju någonting med agenter som fascinerar och hela den världen. Men som vanligt vill vi ju lära känna den vi ska träffa i podden, och i det här fallet är det kanske extra nödvändigt eftersom få nog har hört talas om Katherine Saliusbury som ju är agent och har egen firma och nu jobbar utifrån Sverige. Vi kör faktarutan som vanligt. Since I used to work at Sweden's equivalence of New York Post, I always start with like what we in tabloids have like facts about the person I interview. And so we start with family.
I have a sambo here in Stockholm, George Friedman, who I met 9 years ago in midsummer in New York. And we have a daughter who was born in August this past year.
And where do you live?
We live here in Salsjödubnes. We just moved here at the beginning of April. Before that, we were on Mariatorget in Södermalm, and I got to Sweden officially in the summer of 2013. But I've been going back and forth since 2009, I think. Much more time in New York than in Stockholm, but still visits here regularly.
And what title do you have?
I guess CEO and founder is the one I officially use. Agent is probably the more accessible, accurate title.
Education?
I went to college at the University of Chicago and majored in Slavic languages and literatures. And then I went on to law school at Cornell and finished there in 2003.
Salary?
I don't know exactly what my salary is. It changes regularly. But I invest pretty much everything we get back into the business, so we're growing it right now.
Do you have any honors on your way, either as an athlete or as an agent, lawyer?
I got a pro bono award when I was a lawyer for doing giving a lot of free legal services to people in the community, children that needed representation to get better health care. Are you talking about past honors?
Yeah, past honors.
Yeah. And in college, I graduated with honors, both types you could get. And as an athlete, I had some swimming records at University of Chicago.
Do you vote? Here in Sweden we vote nowadays the second Sunday in September. It used to be the third Sunday in September. I usually vote like a blank vote, but at least I go there to the booth and vote. Do you vote?
I absolutely vote. Obama.
Obama. Change.
Except I will say I voted for Hillary in the primary.
Okay. I have the motto that I don't trust anyone. Do you have a motto or that you live for?
I probably do. Let me think about it. I do tell myself, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I say that one quite a lot in my head.
That sounds good. When was the last time you were drunk?
Oh, probably not that long ago.
And if I look into the register of crimes, do I find anything spectacular?
Fortunately, no. That one I have to be extra careful of, or I'd lose my status as a lawyer.
What do you read?
I read, well, right now, a lot of baby development books, a lot of nerdy soccer books. I'm reading The Nowhere Men about scouting. But I also am in a book group in Brooklyn and have been in one for years. So I'm trying to keep up with the books that they read, but I haven't been doing the best job.
Sounds quite a commute for a book circle to go to Brooklyn. What do you listen to?
I listen to a lot of alternative rock, I guess would be the catchphrase for it. And I go through phases where I'll listen to one band 7,000 times before I move on to the other one. So recently it's been Mumford & Sons and Alt J, and I guess the same ones everyone else is listening to. Coldplay, Adele. What do you watch? I probably watch too much television. Soccer, of course, and then I watch pretty much everything HBO and Showtime produce. How many times do you look at your smartphone every day? That is an embarrassingly large number of times. I would probably not want to know. Where do you surf? And I don't mean surfing on a board, but more internet. Internet? Well, I always check out Huffington Post and New York Times for some general news, and then I log on to the MLS website compulsively to see what's going on over there. Since I'm removed, I need to stay up on it. And then I get a bizarre number of my news from weird feeds on Facebook. If you think about, friends post a link and then you end up on some random blog I never visit again, but read something there. Ja, som ni förstod på faktarutan så kör vi på engelska, och jag hoppas att de flesta har följt med i sin skolengelska tillräckligt väl för att kunna förstå det här utan att behöver översättas. Det tror jag faktiskt att de flesta fixar. Annars får man ta hjälp av en vän eller en granne eller någonting och slå sig ner och lyssna på podden och sakta men säkert gå igenom det hela. Det borde inte vara några problem. När vi nu går vidare i podden så är det ju naturligt att ta reda på hur hon hamnade i Sverige, Katherine Saliusbury. För det känns ju lite udda att åka ut i ett sommarfågert Stockholm i Saltsjöbo någonstans och hitta en kvinnlig amerikansk agent. It's kind of strange to have an American female agent in Sweden. How come you ended up here? It's a very strange story, I suppose, and mostly an accident, I guess. My Sambu George, he used to play here in Nacka for Nacka FF, I think it was called, in Norrbotten, and then went to college in the States. And I met him over there. And his uncle, Jan Friedman, was chairman of Hammarby at the time. And so topics started to come up with Charlie Davies and players from America going over, like Bedoya. And also one of George's college friends, Buna Kundul, who played for Hasselbach on the Red Bulls. At the time, he was struggling with contract issues with MLS. So I started helping out, and one thing led to another, and here I am. So you left your career as a business lawyer to work with football and soccer, as you say in the States. How come you took that step? I was actually off on a break from being a corporate lawyer. I had a medical problem I was focusing on, and I was very bored trying to get better. And while I was bored, I started to put in time on this, and then decided it would be a great move for me. I found it really rewarding to hear about Buna's problems, and instead of servicing large, big companies like JP Morgan and Citibank, or Russian oil companies, or those were my clients before, it was kind of impersonal. So it was great to get on a human level and see someone doing something for following their passion. Was really interesting. And what was your connection to soccer before that? It was very limited. I didn't know much about soccer until probably 8 years ago, and that made me a little nervous at first, whether I'd be qualified or whether I could catch up with my peers in time to actually be good at this. But then I thought, people go to medical school in 5 years, and this isn't neurosurgery, so maybe I can handle it if I just really focus and ask a lot of questions and study a lot and watch a ton of soccer.
Do you need to know soccer to help players with their contracts, different deals and things like that?
I think when I started, I thought the answer was no, but now I think you do, absolutely, to be good at it. And so I've put in a lot of time and effort to get to know it a lot more. I'll still never be a scout like a Premier League scout. I'll never have that ability, and I think scouting 14, 15-year-olds is extra hard. I think scouting seniors is much easier. But you need to really understand how a player is going to fit into the team you're trying to move him to, why he's going to be an asset and just how much of an asset, or you don't really know how much he's going to be worth to them. So yeah, you can negotiate the contracts, but a good, fruitful negotiation is grounded in facts and not just bullying someone. And so you have to know your facts. So I think you do.
Den tidigare affärsadvokaten Katherine Saliusbury sadlade alltså om och blev fotbollsagent. Och det finns ju skillnader mellan att vara jurist och vara agent. Det är nog både plus och minus, och det är kanske därför en del agenter jobbar ihop med jurister, för att man ska kunna vara med på vissa gungor och kunna avstå vissa karuseller. Bland annat så är det ju så att en advokat får ju inte ta betalt på samma sätt som en agent. En agent tar betalt i procent. En advokat, åtminstone i Sverige, måste ta betalt per timme, och sen kan man inte skriva lika långa kontrakt om man är advokat jämfört med om man är agent. Vi borrar lite i de frågeställningarna med Katherine Saliusbury. JP Morgan and Russian oil companies on one side, and now soccer and football. Which world is the most shady?
It's soccer for sure.
It is?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I even did debt. I did unregulated debt instruments when I was a lawyer, which is pretty much what blew up.
Okay, that's when they borrowed on houses and things like that. And
yeah, I mean, I didn't do
the housing bubble.
Yeah, we didn't do anything related to houses, but we worked in debt. And I remember one day I was hired by a bank, and I went into the bank that I was working at, and I had this hybrid banking legal role. And we'd been doing deals, but now we were going to do the financing for the actual bank I was at. And they said, well, we've made $1 billion worth of loans, and now we're going to drop those loans into an entity in the Cayman Islands and sell those loans to raise another roughly $1 billion. And I thought, how do you do that? And they said, well, it's like chopping up chickens and selling chicken legs. Now you can sell it as a whole new thing. And of course, it's much more sophisticated than that, and that was my primer. But it was a very interesting industry, and fortunately, when I look back on it, all of my deals have been solid deals. They didn't turn into these ugly, embarrassing skeletons. I was working with good people and on good teams, but I can see how it blew up. I remember when I was at Simpson, I was representing Blackstone, which is a big private equity shop, probably the biggest in the market at the time. And they could beat up anyone in town on terms. And the attorney on the other side of me represented Lehman Brothers. And I said at the end, we knew each other personally. I said, you just gave me everything. This is going to be terrible. This is going to be a terrible deal in the long run. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. Our bankers get their bonuses based on deals closed, not on what happens 3 years later. So you could see the incentives were just off, and people were making deals they knew were bad.
And still, soccer is worse.
Soccer is worse.
It doesn't sound good. We'll get back to that. How do you work now? You work with a company with your husband, and do you have a network or scouts or?
Yeah, George is still involved, but he really does our books and is a resource for me. He has a full-time startup of his own, so it's been pretty much my own. I work on it full-time and have been since the start, and he hasn't for the last 4 years. So it's been mine, and I have interns occasionally through this sports law program in Tulane, and we have scouts that we work with to give us advice and do scouting reports, but it's pretty much me.
Do you have a network with other agents, lawyers that you work together with?
Yeah, I work probably 75% or more of what I do is brokering for other agents. So agents here in Stockholm or Sweden that want to move a player to MLS, or right now I'm working with a Russian partner who has a player that wants to play in MLS. I'll help those players find teams.
Några år efter att FIFA infört agentlicensen så blev Rachel Anderson i England den första kvinnliga agenten som tog ut en licens. Hon har gett en bild av sexism och hur hon ofta tog som sekreterare vid förhandlingar, och att hon slutade klä sig i kjol och började ha lite kostymbyxor istället för att smälta in eller för att bli en del av det hela. Naturligtvis är det en speciell värld, och det är det oavsett om man är man eller kvinna, men kanske extra när man är så lite representerad, och det är naturligtvis ett ämne som jag är lite intresserad att höra med Katherine Saliusbury, om hon beställer en drink istället för en kopp te som Rachel Anderson brukade köra som trick. It's 17 years since the world saw its first female agent, Rachel Anderson, and I think Norway had Riise, the mother of the Riise brothers. She was also an agent 4 or 5 years later. Is it different to be a woman in this industry?
I mean, of course, yeah, it has to be. I'm not exactly sure what it would be like if I weren't a woman, because I can't see that, so I can't compare it. I think if you're a woman, you didn't have a career like some of the other agents where they were national team players. So it's maybe not being a woman so much as not being an ex-star or having been an ex-men's soccer player. So you get questioned on your knowledge and the sophistication of your understanding of the sport, and especially again with my history. So if Pia Sundhage wanted to be an agent, I don't think she'd get the same questions. But then, of course, there's the fact that you're the only woman in the room most of the time.
Yeah, I read that out of 7,000 licensed agents, only 3% are women. How come?
I have no idea. Yeah, it's. I think it's a pretty tough business, and I think it's tough for anyone to be an agent. So I think we all must be missing a screw to be in this business. Now that I have a daughter, I realize there's a lot of travel involved. Maybe it's a little bit harder on mothers. But also, I think a lot of people that go into agenting used to be a player. So maybe that's part of it. They get a running start. They have friends who were players, and they get an immediate book of business, hopefully. And they have an immediate set of contacts. So it's an easier entrance than if you're starting from scratch.
When I read about Rachel Anderson, who was the first agent, she said that very often they thought she was the secretary, and she always was very conscious not to order tea. She took a drink instead, just to be one of the boys. So because tea was kind of a bad sign. Do you have tricks like that, or do they take you as the secretary?
I was in Guatemala for the Under-20 World Cup qualifiers, and I was hanging around with one of my close friends who was the Arsenal scout at the time, and everyone kept thinking I was his girlfriend, not a colleague. That was just a running joke at that tournament because it was so consistent that I must be there on vacation with him. So there are those instances, of course. And then her comment about a tea, I imagine, is I've done more than just ordered a drink. I'll follow them to a strip club if that's where they're going.
You have?
Yeah. I can't be saying, "Oh, I'm headed home now, guys." You know.
Is that where they do the deals?
No, but it's football, so people do things at night, and I don't think it helps me to turn around and go home. It just flags that I'm different. So I put on my night out on the town hat and make it fun.
When you compare your previous life as a business lawyer with this life, is it more open for women in that hard world of business lawyers in New York than the soccer world?
There were definitely more women, but actually the particular type of law I did was very few women. And when I went in-house to this bank that was started up, there were 30 people, and I think 2 women were secretaries, one was a junior analyst, and one was a more senior banker, and me. So it was still kind of a minority, quite a minority.
But do you feel it was easier to be a woman there than in the world of football?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, football's difficult. Maybe I should say, not because I'm a woman, I think that job was a lot easier than this one. Even though the deals were $7 billion, they were more civilized.
Says it all. How do you react when someone thinks you're the scout's girlfriend or something? Do you get angry, or do you joke about it? Or
yeah, we joke about it. I try and be gracious so the person doesn't feel embarrassed, and then joke about it.
When do you get angry? Because I would be angry to feel that kind of discrimination.
I feel angry when a deal doesn't go well. That's when I get angry. There's one agent I tried to cooperate with on a deal, and I know I got the very best deal I could have for the player, and then he wasn't happy with it and said, "Next time I have to negotiate the deal instead, Katherine. I would have done a better job." And I said, I can't imagine what you're basing that on. You didn't hear any of the conversations, and I certainly don't have a history of being a bad negotiator. I was 24 years old when I was doing much bigger deals than this. So that made me angry because it was clearly based on nothing except the fact that he thought I couldn't do it, probably because I was a woman.
Who was that?
I'll leave his name out since I just made him out to be such a sexist person. But there were other instances. I remember a sporting director that was trying to screw me over on a deal, and I was trying to stand up for myself, called me a silly little girl, and said, "No one will believe you put this together anyway." I get angry, but I think that happens to all agents. They just happen to use silly little girl for me, but they'd probably use something else for another agent.
Working in Sweden, how does Sweden compare to when it comes to sexism and discrimination compared to like the US or other leagues?
I think Sweden is quite ahead, actually. The people I've worked with out of Sweden rarely question my competence, which is great. The US is pretty good too. They're not quite so shocked to see a woman in my shoes, but then I think it's a little more, it's a little harder to be taken as seriously. But I've passed that now. But at the beginning, 5 years ago, I think it was so many agents come and go. They start up for a year and close up shop. So I think in the States I had a little more to prove that I was serious.
Vid en första anblick så framstår åtminstone de amerikanska proffsligorna som mer socialistiska än den mer vilda västernartade marknaden i Europa, där det är mer upp till spelare att göra precis som de vill. I USA så kontrollerar ofta ligorna, och inte minst i fotboll, eller det jänkarna föredrar att kalla soccer, Major League Soccer, styr ju ofta affärer, och det är rätt intressant att höra om svårigheterna just att få över spelare från Europa till USA beroende på problemen med ligan, att ligan är de som bestämmer. Och sen så är det ju intressant att höra vad man har som mål som agent när man håller på att bygga upp sin verksamhet.
If you look at the agent business, it's roughly 7,000 licensed agents in the world. FIFA license, you're not licensed because you're a lawyer. And on top of that, all lawyers, and then there's quite a few people who are trying to strike gold by acting as agents. And still only 30-40% maybe can live on it on 100%. How can you live on your just working as an agent?
No, I made some good decisions back when I was a lawyer with what I did with my income then. And so it's given me the ability to build this. I mean, if I had started out thinking I have to live off of it day one, I probably would have built a different business model. So instead, I've come up with the model that we're going to reinvest everything and oftentimes do deals not based on the agent fee, but instead the profile and how much it's going to enhance our relationships or build bridges into new markets or learn from something. So we also never feel pressure to do a deal just to get it done, just to get a dollar in the door. So I've been able to take the long view, and I think it makes it much easier to preserve your integrity when you can go at everything with that. And I remember a couple of my mentors, when I started, explained how long it took them to really be profitable. So I don't think it's possible to hit the ground very profitable, and the expenses of traveling and all that are quite high.
What are your goals? Where will you be in 3, 5, 10 years?
I hope we're a very major agency 10 years from now. And I hope that 3 years from now, it's a agency with a lot of power in the market that we're trying to work in. And I hope to find some people I can truly partner with, not just as a broker, but build the agency with more agents. I think that's a very tricky thing to do in this business. So hopefully we'll grow the number of agents as well.
Which market is the most important for you?
It's two things. I guess MLS is the natural one. I didn't start by looking at that market. I started by thinking we'd move players out of North America into Europe, but the league has grown so quickly and has become so interesting that that's a big part of what we do. And then as I started working in that market, I realized how few agents can work in that market. And then also I think it's growing so quickly that assuming it grows like I think it will grow, then that will be our primary market. But it's always fun to work in the big European markets. So hopefully we can do more of that as well, either selling top players out of MLS into big leagues or finding young talent if we eventually grow into that and moving them.
Is soccer finally taking off in the States? It's not going to close. We've had some leagues during the years that have started off really big and then closed down.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing actually. It's when I started, I really thought MLS is a joke, and if you're a serious player in North America, don't you want to leave? And now I'm a complete convert, and I think of course it has its flaws, but it's a really great league. It's rising quickly and it's fun to watch, and I think people enjoy playing in it, and I think it's very well run. This time around they've learned from a lot of mistakes, and they've learned from a lot of other sports in the States in terms of what works. So I think they're doing a great job. I think it's really exciting. And when people say, do you think Americans are watching soccer? I think it's really different now. People like my father, who are, I don't know, 5th or 6th generation Americans and really are into baseball. I don't think he needs to start watching soccer for it to take off. I think you have so many immigrants, and if you're an immigrant, you probably come from a soccer country. So the stadiums are filling up. Seattle Sounders, I think, sells out 36,000 tickets per game. Portland has an amazing atmosphere. I think most games have at least 20,000 in the stadium. And new teams coming in like NYCFC and Beckham's new team in Miami and Orlando City and Atlanta. It's pretty exciting. So,
if you look at Europe and compare it to the US, it's kind of striking, at least as a European, to see that the setup of the league is more socialistic than in Europe. Here is more eat or be eaten, but in the US, the leagues kind of control everything over the players. How come, and how different is that to work with?
I think that even though it looks like socialism, it's really driven by money. So it's more profitable for the league as a whole to cooperate than to fight among each other. So they've learned that from baseball and basketball and American football. Basically, New York and LA would dominate, and who would want to watch a game? Kind of like maybe Scotland or even to some extent Spain have seen happen in their leagues. So by making it equal, people care in Detroit, and there's no soccer team in Detroit, but there's a baseball team, and people care in St. Louis, and they care in cities where there isn't the same financial resources or number of people. So the concept of parity, each team being equal, makes everyone more successful. And then how do you make every team equal? It takes about 7,000 rules, and they're not written down anywhere as far as I can tell, and they shift constantly. So sometimes we say the only rule in MLS is there is no rule, and it's a full-time job to keep up with how the league runs, and the best way to bring a player in from abroad, but it's a fascinating league, and the draft is fun and everything.
When I talked to Hasse Backe, my colleague who worked in New York, he says it was so impossible with all these rules around which players and the salary cap and everything, and it's also difficult. I mean, you have players like Thierry Henry makes $5 million a year, and then you have another teammate who makes maybe $40,000. It's very big differences. It must be a challenge for you as an agent to get out a lot of money because the salary cap makes it difficult.
Absolutely. That's part of when you asked about our business model. We've brought lots of offers to lots of players, knowing maybe they weren't going to be the winning offer, because there just isn't enough money in the league yet. So if Lasse Nielsen wants to look for an offer in MLS, we bring him the best offer we can. It might not be enough money. And that will hopefully change in January when the players' salary cap is renegotiated. The players' union will negotiate with the league, and the amount of money available for salaries will hopefully change. So we are doing kind of a land grab, stay in the market and keep bringing the offers until the offers get good enough to beat.
Because still it is difficult to recruit players unless they're like superstars like Henry or Lampard or Robbie Keane, when they can go as designated players and get these top salaries. It's difficult to recruit players from Sweden, example.
Yeah, Sweden's a good example because the level in MLS, I think most people would now fairly say it's higher than in Allsvenskan. So only the real top players from Allsvenskan will do well in MLS. And then they're not getting the salaries that they want. So it really is only a good fit for a player who wants to be playing in that league for another reason. There are lots of players from South America that come to the league. I think part of what they want is a green card, perhaps, or some players go for the college education and then end up in Major League Soccer. But no, the salaries absolutely have to go up for the league to go to the next level. On the other hand, you'd be shocked at how many players go for less than they could get in another league just to play in MLS, which makes my job even harder, of course, because there are plenty of good players like Nesta going for non-DP money.
Alessandro Nesta, Milan player who went to Toronto, I think. And
Montreal,
Montreal, and didn't get that paid that much. How common is it to go around the rules, to go around the salary cap with like sponsorships and things like that? How creative are you in that sense?
The league has buttoned all that up a few times. Some teams have tried to go around it, like maybe the Red Bulls in particular, because they're so structured for it. But even getting a car from, say, a sponsor when you're in town is they button up all the loopholes. So the best way around the loopholes is to actually know the rules and know, okay, but they have a little pot of money for players relocating, so maybe we can use that money. Or there are marketing contracts you can get through the league, maybe we can use that, and they're better for taxes. So there are really no ways to, cheat's the wrong word, but no ways to be super creative. Instead, you just have to really dig into the rules and find the pockets of money.
Innan Katherine Saliusbury blev fotbollsagent så jobbade hon som affärsadvokat i New York och jobbade för idels stora företag, och där kan man ju misstänka att det var rätt hårda tag och en del fulspel och armbågar för att man skulle vinna sina strider i rätten. Men när hon jämför med fotbollen så är det ju ganska klart var hon tycker att det är tuffast, hårdast och var det är mest fulspel. Och det ger ändå en tankeställare.
Before you said that the world of football or soccer is shadier than the world of high finance and where you worked before. What kind of concrete examples do you have of shady business?
Well, I suppose one of them was we brought a player to the New York Red Bulls. And before we could finish doing the deal, the sporting director went and met with the player and said, pretend you don't know Katherine, and then we can cut out the agent fee. And I spoke to the player and I said, but, we have all these emails and text messages. And by the way, you came to me. I didn't come find you. And we did this for you. We found you, your dream team. And frankly, it's even a little bit above your level. So we did our job. I'd appreciate it if you don't do this. And he said, no, I was told that if I don't distance myself from you, then I can't go to the team. And so I called the sporting director, and that's when he called me a silly little girl. And
is that Erik Soler?
Yes.
The Norwegian who worked with Hasse Backe then?
Not my favorite sporting director. And then...
Former agent. He knows the game.
He knows the game. And then we spoke to the player's father. He was involved. And George said, my partner said, well, Katherine's worked really hard on this. It's rather unfair, don't you think? We should at least tell the truth. If you want to negotiate the agent fee, we can do that, but at least tell the truth. And his father said, oh, but if he tells the truth, it'll cost him money. That was exactly how he said it. And I could have done more than I did because, it was so obvious that I had been representing him. But instead, I called Major League Soccer and said, really unhappy with how Eric has treated me, and it's not very fun for me to be bringing good players into the league like this. And they said, don't worry, we'll sort it out. So they stepped up for me and took care of it. And other agents that I'd been working with, had my back on that as well and gave me some pointers. So we sorted it out. But I just remember even, the father was like a police officer saying, well, if you tell the truth, you owe money. And I thought, well, it's like stealing. Of course, that's a straight up crime. That's not a loophole.
How I mean, getting into the business as a lawyer compared to an agent. I mean, sure, FIFA have their test to get your FIFA license, but still, as a lawyer, you come from a higher moral background, maybe. And how do you look at the world of football and how FIFA, UEFA, and the leagues control it?
Well, first, I always have to be clear that I'm not the player's lawyer. I'm the player's agent. Otherwise, I have completely different responsibilities, and I couldn't represent them quite as well if I'm their lawyer than if I'm their agent. But I do have the legal training, which is always in the back of my head and influences how I handle situations. And what shocks me is that people don't actually get ahead when they cheat like that. It doesn't actually work in the long run. I mean, the Russian oil companies are pretty smart and pretty successful, and they're not, at least from what I did, ever breaking the law or cheating someone. I think there's a lot more repeat business. That's probably the real reason in my old career that people didn't misbehave in quite the same way. They needed their reputation. JP Morgan wouldn't be JP Morgan without their reputation. It's unnecessary. There's no reason why things can't be done well in a straightforward way. So that's what surprises me, is that people think they need to get dirty in order to be successful. You really don't have to, I don't think.
Why do you think that UEFA and FIFA are so passive in this question?
I have no idea. Probably expensive to get in between every argument, or I also think there's a culture. People think it has to be done this way, or it's been done this way. And it seems to just be a culture, I guess, would be my best answer.
How often do you get asked if you want to transfer in this player? I need so and so many $1,000, or the old George Graham Rune Hauge deal, where he bought Rune Hauge's players and he paid him some money.
I guess I don't come across that so much because people know me, I think.
Is it difficult to work in a culture that is so shady?
I think I spend a lot of time trying to mind read what's going on behind the scenes. That makes it difficult. It would be better if there was just more transparency, more efficient, more success for everyone, I think. So, yeah, it's difficult.
Would it be better if they followed the North American model, where they have like the salaries, or you can read what the players make? It's official salaries. Do you think that would be better transparency?
Yeah, I think that helps. Another reason why I think it's not very shady in MLS is because the league goes and checks every deal before it's done. I guess the example people in Sweden know is Mellberg. Toronto came to terms with Mellberg, and then the league stepped in and I think made a big mistake, but the league stepped in and said, no, we think this is too much money. They do make
that was
mistakes.
when Swedish defender Olof Mellberg was on his way to Toronto, and they did a deal, but the league stopped it.
Yeah, so the league gets the ultimate say in the end, and they'll look around and try and make sure they get it wrong, probably as often as they get it right, but there's someone else double checking a team, so you can't get away with some extra 100,000s here and there to smooth a deal through, because people will catch it. I'm not saying MLS doesn't have corruption, but not in the same way.
Looking as an American on Swedish football, how would you rate the shadiness in Swedish football?
I don't think I know enough. I haven't transferred a player into Sweden.
But you have transferred from Sweden?
Yeah, I've transferred from Sweden.
But no shadiness there?
No.
Alltid intressant att höra med någon som kommer utifrån hur de ser på svensk fotboll och varför Katherine Saliusbury valt att bara jobba med herrar och inte med damer.
What kind of players do you represent?
We have all sorts of different players. For example, a 20-year-old from Trinidad who's maybe going to go to a team in Mexico, to Stephanie Shizaki going to the Galaxy, or Christian Wilhelmsen going to the Galaxy, we were brought in to consult on the Nesta transaction.
On the what? The
Nesta going to Montreal.
Okay.
Not when he went to Montreal, but when he was looking around MLS to see, should he be a DP? Can he not get a DP sort of salary? Or Inzaghi when he was finishing his career and was looking in MLS. We'll work with players from, all over Costa Rica.
Do you work with female players?
No, I have very little knowledge about about women's soccer. I didn't play myself, and I've never really followed it, so I don't know much about it.
Because that's we've had quite a few Swedish players playing in the US, and Pia Sundhage has been there both as a coach for Boston Breakers in Philadelphia and then for the national team. But that hasn't been. Is it too little money in women's soccer?
You mean why I don't do it? I don't know enough about it, and frankly, I'm just so busy. I just don't have room to take on more leagues, and in a way, that's 2 more leagues.
What's the reputation of Swedish players in the US, the MLS?
Let's see. Well, everyone thinks they have great English. So when I speak to a team, they say, "Oh, that'll be great. He'd be so easy to slot in because he speaks great English." Then the follow-up question is he fast enough? Because the MLS is a real focus on athleticism. So a player can't get away with just being smart and tactical. He has to have a lot of speed. I think, for example, Wilhelmsen, who has quite a lot of speed, I think he was surprised when he got to MLS, and it wasn't his weapon like it had been before, or even just in the Euros. So there's a little bias, are they quick enough? Or are they kind of going to be more of a tall center back idea? Or can we get a target striker maybe from Sweden? Yeah.
The only designated player Sweden has had lately is Freddie Ljungberg. What was his? What impression did he make on MLS? And be honest.
I don't know. He was a little bit before I got deep into MLS, so I missed him. We didn't overlap, and I didn't hear the buzz.
Okay, but it's not like people contacting you and say, "We want a new Freddie Ljungberg."
No.
Okay. Do you think the amount of Swedish players moving west will go up, or will it go down?
I hope it will go up. I think it will go up if the salaries go up. I think that would make a big difference. Players with EU passports have different options than players without EU passports. So, for example, I think there were 60 players from Colombia in MLS. And if you're a player from Colombia, it's harder to go play in England or play in Holland or play in Italy. So the offers on the table are going to be different. But for a Swedish player who's talented, who's 24 years old, he's going to have very competitive offers that are going to probably beat out any offer from MLS at this point. But hopefully that will change. They have new rules for the designated players that are under 21 and designated players that are under 23 because they want to bring them into the league. So for the right player, I think it could happen. I think MLS is very hesitant to be a retirement league. So a 32-year-old who's maybe done in Italy and is deciding, should I go back to Sweden or should I go to MLS? That's a much harder sell. He's going to be worth more money going back to Malmö or somewhere than going to MLS. So those are hard deals to come up with.
There's one Swedish superstar, and he has a contract with Paris for 2 more years. But after that, he's been talking about the MLS. We're talking about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. What do you know about the league's interest in him?
I'm sure they would love him.
Even though he's retiring, or he'll be 35 at the time.
I think that's okay.
Do you know anything about him showing interest of going there?
Just through secondary sources, and I think it would be phenomenal, and he'd be fantastic, obviously, for any league. And hopefully his agent thinks they need some help with the MLS rules when he thinks to do it.
But they would have to find some kind of a Beckham solution with a lot of money, because he's not that cheap.
No, they just signed David Villa to New York City FC. I think he probably got a pretty good contract too.
But he's going to play in Australia first and then in the US. Isn't that a little bit Harlem Globetrotters in a way?
Yeah, NYCFC, they don't start until January. They don't have a team yet. So I suppose that's tricky for them to deal with, and that's probably the best solution. And brave of them, so he doesn't get injured. Or they would have to worry he gets injured, but you never really have to worry about that. You're not supposed to. But Jermaine Defoe was a recent one who got a lot of money, and Michael Bradley and Clint Dempsey. The owners of the teams have a lot of money, and they want to spend it. And most of the teams do spend more than FC Copenhagen and Rosenborg and the equivalent or semi-equivalent teams. But it's those designated players that make up most of that money.
How closely do you follow Allsvenskan?
I go to games when I'm working on moving a player, so I don't follow it as a league so much as I follow individuals within the league. So, for example, Ishizaki, I'd been working on him for a while, so I went to lots of Elfsborg games and watched a lot of Elfsborg. But even when I watched Elfsborg, I was focusing on him. So that's kind of the way I watch it. And I suppose other people who've been doing this for 30 years can watch everything that's going on the field when they watch a game, but I have to focus my attention. So.
And the next deal you're doing is Lasse Nilsson to Columbus Crew.
Yeah, I wished that had gone through, but the window just closed, so who knows?
Was it close?
I thought it was very close, yeah. So I was disappointed, but again, MLS needs more money to make a deal like that happen, and we were close, but not close enough. And then, of course, Elfsborg got in the cup final. The MLS window closed on the 12th, and the cup final was on the 18th, so it changed the playing field a little bit. So who knows, maybe this summer.
Will you move anyone else except Lasse Nilsson if that becomes a reality?
Yeah, hopefully we'll move a Romanian player, capped for Romania 50 times or more. Hopefully we'll move him to one of the bigger teams in MLS, and we have a few others I'd love to do.
Any Swedes?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of Swedes. Yeah, so
Can you give me the names?
I would. It's probably no harm in giving you the names, but I'll not until I get approval.
Okay, that's bad.
En vanlig dag på jobbet, ja, det ger ofta en del bra inblickar när folk ska beskriva hur de jobbar. Därför låter jag Katherine Saliusbury ge sin bild av hur hon jobbar för att vi ska få en inblick i hur det är att jobba som agent.
How's a regular day for you? Do you mostly work towards the US time, or since you don't follow games that closely here in Sweden?
I will wake up, feed my daughter, spend some time with her, and then the nanny arrives and I slide over to my computer and catch up on the news and maybe watch a bunch of highlights or condensed matches, or if there's a player that say my partner in Costa Rica just sent me, then I'll pull him up on Y-Scout and watch as much as I can. make a bunch of phone calls, send out some annoying emails. I'm sure they're following up saying, what do you think? What do you think? And if there's a game going on in Stockholm, I'll try and go to it, especially if there's a player that we're watching. There normally is so many players want to go to MLS.
Is it different for you when the transfer window opens, or is it pretty much busy all year round?
The activity changes during the course of the year. So in the fall, when MLS teams are starting to make decisions for their next season, because they're on the same calendar as Sweden. So they'll come over to watch the last few games of the season if they're looking at a player. Like, we worked pretty hard on Kennedy when he was at Djurgården. So, for example, that
Kenny Guananike, you tried to move him.
Yeah, and Keba Ceesay was around that time, and Daniel Sjöland, and we had Yusuf Chibsa. We had offers for all those players that fall. Again, they weren't good enough offers to tempt the players, but they were interested, so we brought over teams from MLS and drove them around, Malmö or wherever the games were. So we do a lot of that, hosting scouts more in the fall, sometimes in the late spring before the summer window. And then in January, I try and get to the combine, which is like the college tournament, and the draft. So different things, different times of the year.
If you look at the Swedish league, it feels that there's maybe more money for the average player here, since it's hard to move Swedish players to the US. Why doesn't more American players come here as a way into Europe?
That's what we thought we would be doing when we started the agency. And it's a couple of things. The American players that are really good, they get extra money. They get it through what's called Generation Adidas. And so their salaries are actually quite high when they're coming out of the draft.
What's Generation Adidas? It's some sponsor deal.
Yeah, it's basically that. It's coordinated through Major League Soccer. So if you're young and leaving college early, you can get a Generation Adidas contract that then those players are making $250,000, $350,000 a year, and the taxes are different. So we did try with a player, Kellen Rowe, who was a top draft pick out of college, and Djurgården at the time with Magnus Persson and Khaled. They knew the U.S. market quite well and knew how talented Kellen was, and came up with their best deal. And then we even subsidized it with a Nike deal, because if he signs in MLS, then he's with Adidas. So Nike has an interest in getting top young national team players into their roster of players. So we even got a good deal from Nike, I think close to $100,000 a year. But ultimately, there's a real pull to go through the draft and see how high you go in the draft and go play in front of your friends and family in the stadium. So you have just like in any league, some players love to leave and some players want to stay home. We ran into a little bit of that, but also it's hard to argue that the level's better. So they would really rather go straight to Holland or somewhere, and then that's harder. That's a much harder move.
Even though it didn't really work out for Charlie Davis after his car accident, he and Alejandro Bedoya are good examples of coming to Sweden and then moving to bigger clubs in Europe.
I think it's a great idea. If you're a young, talented 20-year-old in the States, I think it's a great move for your career to come play at a team like Malmö or AIK or Helsingborg or something like that, and really develop tactically. I think the players in America are athletic and technical, but they really need to develop tactically and can do that more quickly here. And then they're in a window league, I call it, or everyone calls it, where they get seen more and taken more seriously, and they've already shown they've adjusted to Europe. But if you're a 20-year-old and you want to take that risk, it is a risk to leave home where people know you and they're rooting for you, and instead be the foreigner that took a local guy's spot and probably don't get that generation Adidas money or a deal quite as good. So,
is there a lack of interest from Swedish clubs of recruiting from the US?
Well, that too, I suppose. It's a hard sell. I think some teams have been interested since the start, since we started this business. Some people were very open to the idea. Håkan Mild, for example, when he was at Gothenburg, and Jesper Jansson, they were some of the first people that took meetings with me and were open to it. But then to find them the quality they want at a price that works, that just gets tough. And a player with the mentality to go abroad, it's tough.
Okay, so you don't think we'll see an influx of American players in Allsvenskan?
I don't think so. I don't spend a lot of time on it because I think it's a tough sell to everyone, even if I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you very much. I usually round up with asking if you Google yourself.
I should, to make sure there isn't anything wrong on it, but I haven't done it in quite some time.
So then you don't read Flashback either. It's the dark side of Google, I would say, but it's more like a forum with really strange stories.
No. Am I on there?
I don't know. I haven't looked at Flashback, but it's not everyone's on there in one way or another. Was there any question that you missed that you want to answer now?
No, I think this was a great interview. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. Good luck with the business and in the shady world.
Thank you very much.
Om ni nu störts av lite trummor i bakgrunden när jag har spelat in mina intron så får ni köpa det. Jag sitter i Rio de Janeiro och lägger på de här sista bitarna. Utanför mitt rum så pågår en makalös tillställning. Man laddar upp inför ännu en av Brasiliens matcher, plus att Colombia och Chile, som ju bägge har många fans här, också laddar upp inför sin match. Därför är det både svettigt, varmt och mycket trummor över det hela. Podden tar ingen vila riktigt än, utan jagar på med att hitta intervjuoffer. Gillar ordet offer där. Även här i Rio. Det har inte funnits mycket tid än så länge, men förhoppningen är att de närmsta veckorna ska ge utdelning i form av en del intressanta intervjuoffer nu när det glesar ut lite mellan matcherna, så att jag ger inte upp podden riktigt än, även fall det säkert blir ett uppehåll lite längre fram i sommar. Ni vet som vanligt att ni hittar podden på fotbollskanalen.se och på iTunes, och även för Android finns den ju på olika ställen. Inte särskilt svårt att googla fram den om ni vill lyssna på tidigare avsnitt med bland annat VM-domaren Jonas Eriksson och en hel del andra intressanta personer. Och ni är alltid välkomna att komma med reflektioner på mail till olof.lundh@tv4.se eller på Twitter, där är det Olof Lundh i ett ord. Men glöm inte H som Johan Rheborg glömde när han var inne och högg på mitt skägg. Och Instagram också Olof Lundh i ett ord med H då. Och så kör vi vidare.